I'm Jordan Walker Ross, and I play Little James on The Chosen. Little James was one of the first apostles to follow Jesus.
Jordan Walker. Ross never expected that one role would force him to confront the deepest insecurity of his entire life.
You know, make-believe and reality blurred. The most difficult because of how personal it was.
In The Chosen, he plays Little James, one of the first apostles to follow Jesus. But for Jordan, this character was never just another acting role. Little James was someone who lived with visible pain, isolation, and the feeling of being different from everyone around him. And in many ways, Jordan understood that reality personally long before the cameras ever started rolling.
I was born 2 months premature. I had a lot of health issues as a baby, have cerebral palsy and scoliosis, as well as very severe asthma.
Born with mild cerebral palsy and severe scoliosis, Jordan grew up carrying physical challenges that affected nearly every part of his life. His limp was noticeable. His movement was limited. He underwent surgeries at a very young age, including a full spinal fusion when he was only a child. But according to Jordan, the physical pain was not the hardest part. What stayed with him the longest was the feeling of being rejected. As a teenager, the bullying became so severe that he would sometimes hide between vending machines during lunch just to avoid being seen.
I was just eating lunch in between the vending machines. There was a little crack I could squeeze it in between and then eat my sandwich.
He remembered feeling ashamed of his own body and convinced himself that his disability would prevent him from ever becoming the actor he dreamed of being. That fear followed him into Hollywood. Jordan admitted that he had lost opportunities because of his limp. Some people told him to stop walking the way he naturally walked.
At the time, I had done a guest spot on a Nickelodeon show and Walker, Texas Ranger and a few little things. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know they let cripples on that show." And that's when I saw it as something that I should be ashamed of and something that's truly bad.
Others believed his disability was too visible for the screen. Over time, he began to feel trapped between two realities, the passion he had for acting and the belief that his own body might always hold him back from fully reaching that dream. Everything began to change when Jordan auditioned for The Chosen. According to the creators of the series, his performance immediately stood out. Dallas Jenkins believed he was perfect for the role of Little James, but something unexpected happened during the casting process. While Jenkins knew Jordan had a disability, he apparently did not fully notice his limp at first. It was only later, during the early days of filming, that he truly saw the way Jordan walked. For Jordan, that moment could have gone in a very different direction. In the past, visible differences had often created problems for him professionally. Productions sometimes tried to hide his disability through camera angles, or worse, remove him entirely from projects.
Some thought it was a character choice, and then some were just thought it was too distracting, so they're like, "Hey, can you try to tone it down?" So it was like a psychological warfare that I was going through. And then in school, I got picked on for the first time.
So when Jenkins approached him, Jordan likely expected another difficult conversation. Instead, he received a completely different response. Rather than hiding the limp, the creators of the series asked if they could incorporate it directly into the story of Little James. That decision changed everything for Jordan because, for the first time, his disability was not being treated as something embarrassing that needed to disappear. It became part of the character itself. Suddenly, Little James was no longer simply one of the disciples standing quietly in the background. The character now carried an emotional struggle that reflected something deeply personal and painfully real. Jordan later explained that this gave the role an entirely new layer. Scenes involving Jesus and Little James no longer felt purely fictional to him. The emotions became personal. The questions became personal.
My condition, which you haven't healed.
And as filming continued, the line between the actor and the character slowly began to blur in ways he never expected. One particular storyline affected Jordan more deeply than anything else in the series. In later episodes of The Chosen, Little James begins struggling internally after witnessing Jesus heal countless people, while remaining unhealed himself. Other disciples are sent out to heal the sick, preach and perform miracles. Yet Little James still carries the same physical condition he has lived with his entire life. For Jordan, filming those scenes awakened emotions he had spent years trying to bury.
He would have been the #1 candidate to be healed, and he wasn't. I was angry that he had to go through all of that.
He admitted that while acting opposite Jonathan Roumie, who portrays Jesus in the series, he unexpectedly felt real anger rising inside him. At first, he did not anticipate reacting that way. But during a scene where Jesus tells the disciples that none of them are who they once were, something inside Jordan shifted emotionally.
Listen to me. None of you is what you were. Remember that, all of you.
The other disciples had changed identities. Former tax collectors were no longer tax collectors. Zealots had left behind their old lives. But Jordan remembered thinking, they may no longer be who they once were, but I'm still me.
That made me really angry as well.
That thought stayed with him. As the scenes continued, he found himself emotionally connecting to little James in a way that felt almost painfully real. The character's frustration about remaining unhealed mirrored questions Jordan himself had quietly wrestled with for years. Why do some people receive healing while others continue to suffer? Why do faithful people still experience pain? Jordan even reflected on the death of his grandfather, a doctor who had spent his entire life healing others before slowly losing his own health over the course of 20 years. To Jordan, his grandfather was one of the kindest people he had ever known. If healing were based purely on faith or goodness, he believed his grandfather would have deserved it more than anyone. Those personal memories began pouring into his performance. At one point, Jordan explained that filming these conversations with Jesus felt less like acting and more like therapy. Through little James, he was finally expressing emotions he had rarely spoken about publicly. Bitterness, insecurity, fear, and the exhausting feeling of carrying pain for so long while wondering why it never fully disappeared. What made those scenes even more powerful was the reaction they created behind the camera. During one emotional moment between Jesus and little James, Jordan became so immersed in the scene that the emotions no longer felt scripted. According to him, Jonathan Roumie accidentally called him Jordan instead of little James while filming. Under normal circumstances, that mistake would have broken the scene immediately. But this time, nobody stopped. Because in that moment, it no longer felt like Jonathan was speaking only to a character. He was speaking directly to Jordan himself. The atmosphere on set changed completely. Jordan later revealed that one crew member standing nearby became overwhelmed with emotion and had to step away from filming. Afterward, the crew member explained that he had a son living with cerebral palsy, the same condition Jordan has. Hearing little James ask Jesus why he had not been healed affected him deeply. Watching the character move through grief, frustration, confusion, and acceptance suddenly became personal for everyone in the room. For Jordan, the experience was emotionally overwhelming in a different way. He described the scene as both the easiest and the hardest performance of his life at the same time. Easiest, because the emotions were real and required no acting. Hardest, because he was exposing the most vulnerable parts of himself in front of an entire production team. For years, Jordan had hidden many of those feelings from the public. He admitted that he rarely spoke openly about how insecure he once felt about his disability or how deeply bullying had damaged his self-worth growing up. But through little James, those emotions were no longer hidden. Instead of pretending the pain did not exist, the series allowed him to place it directly into the story. And in doing so, Jordan slowly began discovering something he had struggled to believe for most of his life: that his weakness did not make him less valuable, and that the very thing he once wanted to hide could actually become the reason other people felt understood. Jordan Walker Ross once believed his disability would always be the thing that limited his future. But through The Chosen, the very pain he tried to hide became the reason millions of people connected with his story. Maybe that is why this journey resonates with so many people. Not because it is a story about perfection, healing, or having all the answers, but because it reminds us that some of the deepest wounds people carry are invisible. And sometimes the most powerful testimony is simply refusing to give up. If Jordan's story moved you, take a moment to share your thoughts below. And if someone in your life is struggling to feel accepted, maybe this is the video they need to see today.